The next governor of the Bank of England will be a Canadian. The last time a Canadian had that much influence over all of our lives was when Michael Ignatieff was never off the television. Mark Carney will need more than a nice line in transatlantic witticisms to keep people happy. There are a bunch of people who want him to be just like Mervyn King, and another bunch who are hoping for something completely different. Today we got some hints into who he might please.
He was compared to an emperor, a sun king, a saviour and a superhero. But today Mark Carney was more like a rock star. Arriving late and hoping to get Britain back in the black. Never before has a central banker's arrival been more akin to a major concert, with MPs on the Treasury Select Committee more like groupies, complaining about the ticket price for the gig.
Your current pay in sterling terms is around, total remuneration is around £1/3 isn't that right?
Yep. Yes.
And your total remuneration is going to be in excess of £800,000 in your new job, correct?
Yes.
That salary was supposedly haggled in a grubby office block in South London or a Treasury safe house, so no one could get wind that he was even being interviewed for a job that will be almost as powerful as the Chancellor's. Having got his man, George Osborne's political fate is now wedded to the success or failure of the man from Alberta. And the bank's Monetary Policy Committee may not play ball with its new boss either.
It's hard really to see with an MPC who may not even go along with what he wants, that he's going to be able to transform things very quickly. And the worry then is that the press who really, built him up suddenly turn on him if the economy doesn't pick up. So I think they're wedded together, but this really depends on this economy turning round quickly.
Today, near the Palace of Westminster, some MPs wanted to see if they're going to get value for money with a mini pop quiz on central banking.
What's the capital ratio? How would you describe unwinding QE? What's the liquidity requirement?
The liquidity requirement is the need for a bank to have...
I think that's all I have on that one.
Well, I think you scored pretty well there.
And Mark Mania was also felt in the markets. Check out the Carney curve as sterling spiked up against the US dollar when the Canadians started speaking. So, as he was doubtless asked in the Treasury safe house last year, what does he intend to do with his new toy, the British economy? What, for example, did he feel about the effectiveness of quantitative easing now that £375 billion in new money had been printed?
The work that we have done at the Bank of Canada suggests that the returns to QE have declined, particularly in the United States, as the scale of the program has increased.
That's banker talk, for QE probably can't help the economy much further. Mr. Carney also hinted that when he becomes governor, he might pre-announce that interest rates aren't moving anywhere for a set period of time. Now that helps companies and consumers when they're borrowing money, because they can plan with a fixed repayment in mind for 2 or 3 years.
There's going to be political problems. Savers, for example, and pensioners will know that they've got nothing to gain from this policy, that their very low yields, their very low pensions will stay that way for many years to come. At the moment that there's hope for them, they might think that monetary policy is going to change and help them. Under the new regime, they might be much more likely to complain.
As long as inflation is low...
The issue of inflation targeting, I'll let the Bank of Canada itself explain the current policy, both here and over there.
Low, stable and predictable inflation is the goal. The Government of Canada and the Bank of Canada have a joint agreement to aim for an annual inflation rate of 2%.
We worry about inflation. It's our
Mr.
job.
Carney said that while he was still a fan of the current way interest rates are set, there might be room for some more flexibility, and he's far from convinced that using other targets, including nominal GDP, would work over here. Never in the history of central banking has so much faith been invested in someone paid so much to achieve an economic miracle in such a short time frame. If rockstar Carney performs to his potential, they'll be doubtless screaming out for more in 5 years. Underperform and his escape velocity will break all records.
Well, Philipp Hildebrand was chairman of the Swiss National Bank. He's now vice chairman of the investment company BlackRock. And best of all in this context, he knows Mark Carney. What's he like?
He's a very passionate man and cares deeply about what he does and does it with a great amount of energy. And I think as the British people saw this morning, you know, he's highly competent for this very complex job that's awaiting him.
Well, I want to come on to quite what he said and maybe what it meant, but you know him personally and privately. What should we know about him? What does he do behind the scenes? He runs, doesn't he? This
is a man who runs at 6 in the morning at minus 25 degrees in Ottawa, so I think that should give some reassurance to the British people.
Of what?
Of stamina.
Okay.
And stamina. I can tell you, stamina is a very important part of the job description or of what's required to do this job.
This would be the moment, if he has intimated to you privately what his big plan is, this would be the moment to tell us.
If he had, you could be sure that he had plenty of opportunity this morning to tell the British people and the British public.
Well, that's the thing. We are having to sort of try to read between the lines, and maybe it's inevitable he wasn't going to spill the beans today. There's still several months before he takes over. What did you take from what he did say?
I think what I actually attended and listened carefully in preparation for this evening, so I take away 3 things really. You know, number one, clearly he's highly qualified, as you all could see. Secondly, very importantly, he cares passionately about price stability, i.e. inflation being low, below 2%, in line with the mandate here. And third, as he indicated, there are a number of ways to get to that low inflation rate. And I think he will explore the one that brings the best result on the economy and helps the most to get this economy back on track. So he's clearly prepared, ready and courageous enough to explore these various opportunities.
Is he a consensus kind of guy? You talked a lot about consensus today.
You know, I've worked with the governor for the last 10 years as a public servant in various committees and in various committee settings. And he is somebody, he's a leader. I think that's important to know for those who are going to work with him. But he's a leader who will build consensus and then move forward.
And will he stand up to politicians if George Osborne or some other chancellor says things he doesn't like? Would he tell the chancellor to get lost?
You know, I think it's important to remember this is a man who's had a lot of experience in the public sector. He's been in the finance ministry. He's now been governor for a number of years. So he's used to the tension that can arise between governments and central banks. And I have no doubt that when appropriate, he will stand up. But at the same time, he will do this in a pragmatic way and not make a fetish out of being independent just for the sake of being independent.
He'll be one of the most powerful unelected people in the UK. Central bankers tend to be pretty powerful, don't they? Do you think they're too powerful? Did you think that when you were running?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remember that he has a committee. He will have a committee at the Bank of England, so this is not he can't take personal decisions, so he will have to work with the committee. That's the way it's designed for good reasons. And secondly, I think it is in the nature of central banking that particularly at times of crisis, the central bank tends to be the final backstop for a lot of difficult decisions. And that's when people realize typically that there is a lot of power in there. But I have always thought of it not so much as power, but rather as the ability and having the tools to make a difference in very difficult times.
Mark Carney says the role of monetary policy is to make sure economic growth rates reach escape velocity. What does that mean?
It means that this economy has now essentially had no growth for the last 2 years. So the exit out of this terrible financial crisis has been very difficult. It's not entirely surprising given the enormous size and weight of the financial sector, which has been the root of this crisis, really, that it would take longer in this country than perhaps in other countries. And what he means is that you need to have the policy input that will allow finally for growth to escape out of this low growth environment and create prosperity and sustainable growth again.
Do you think accountability and openness with him will extend to letting us know if there's going to be, for example, a sustained period of low interest rates, letting the public in on that?
Well, I think the fact is we don't know. The very essence of central banking or of economic policy making generally is uncertainty. And he made that very clear today, that he doesn't even know what the economy will look like 5 months from now when he arrives here in London. So, you know, there is great uncertainty. At the same time, it certainly looks like we will have low interest rates for quite some time, not just in this country, but in many other countries as well. That has been one of the features of this crisis and is partly a result of the policy response that we've seen all over the world.
When you look at the state of the UK economy, what do? Do you shake your head?
So I'm a visitor here. I've lived 10 years here before. I'm now back for a second time. It's a wonderful country. And
That's
I think
why you're the ideal man to ask.
Well, I think it's very important for the British people to have some confidence. This is a great country. This is a country that historically has been an extraordinarily resilient country.
What about now?
And I have no doubt that this resilience will eventually lead the way out of this, this terrible period. We have to accept that at the root of this crisis was the financial sector, which is very important in this country, so it's going to take time. It's going to take some patience.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.